All right. So we're back to virtual church. Hopefully not for long. So we're looking at children and their parents as kind of we've been doing this for a while off and on. And I wanted to look at the topic of spanking and abuse. And so I'm going to read a few passages out of Proverbs. That's usually the passages that Christians know when it comes to parenting. It's like, if you grew up in the environment I grew up in, if you have a parenting conference, well, it's just all about spanking. Probably that's an exaggeration, but not a huge exaggeration. It formed a huge part of parenting, and it really did form a large part of parenting through most of human history, actually. It's just very recently that spanking has fallen out of favor. And Christians used to know these. In fact, we would make paddles. I used to make paddles. That when I was a kid, I made paddles for all the kids that don't know, and gave them to their parents. That's why I was so popular. I was very popular. I had a lot of friends. And on the paddle they would print or write out these verses, the Proverbs verses on spanking. And let not thy soul spare for his crying. Proverbs 22:15. Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Proverbs 23:13. Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. That was the one that I had engraven on my paddle when I was a kid. Proverbs 29:15. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. That's my favorite one. Proverbs 29:17. It says, correct thy son, and he shall give thee rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. And there's probably a lot of other ones, or there are other ones, but those are the principal ones that parents have for ages. Christian parents have depended on, have grabbing hold of these passages as proof that if you're not spanking your children, then you're out of the will of God. Nowadays, spanking has become taboo. It's like Christians don't even want to call it that. They want to call it chastening or correction or corporal punishment. And we have all these euphemisms or code words for what is good old-fashioned spanking. And previous generations, for them, all correction was spanking. There was nothing else. It's like correcting your child just meant giving them a spanking. And nowadays, correction is anything but spanking. So that's how things have kind of shifted. And a lot of Christian parents have been kind of shamed into not spanking, or at least not talking about it. Don't want to mention the word, don't want to talk about it, because it seems so unsophisticated. It seems so Neanderthalish. It seems so cavemanish to hit. You're hitting. Don't hit the child. It's hitting. And so society has shamed us into thinking that using the word spanking and spanking children is that's unsophisticated, it's unscientific, it's not modern. That goes back in the days when we were using leeches in medicine. And it's seen as that same category of remedies. It's like witchcraft. It's like it's like leeches. And so anyone who wants to fit into modern, sophisticated society, well, you just got to leave that behind. That is not for today. But I want to remind you that we're being shamed by the people who are responsible for the modern society. And so we should look around and see what the evidence of their ideas are. What is the proof what is the proof of their theories? And we should look around and think about that. For instance, in modern society today, let's say since 2008, suicide rates in 8 to 12-year-olds has increased by 8% every year since 2008. So 8 to 12-year-olds, their suicide rate has gone up 8% every year. That's modern parenting. Or at least they have to at least take some ownership of that. And if we look at children who identify as trans, the suicide rate in them is 19 times greater than in other children. So it's going up in normal children by 8% a year, and in children who are trans, it's 19 times higher than their fellow children, children of their same age groups. So it seems to me that whatever parenting types of parenting, whatever parenting strategies is in play in these type of numbers, and that's just one statistic. That's just the most like obvious and in a sense the most startling. But we could look at all metrics, and there's hardly any metric we can look at in children where we can say in modern day we are better off, or children are doing better than they were doing back when spanking was very universal. So my point is this: you as a Christian should not be worried about what anyone in the world thinks about your parenting. Do not let them shame you. Just think about look at the trans issue. They're not just, it isn't just something that's happening. Modern concepts of parenting, the people that would shame you for spanking would tell you should affirm your child if he identifies as trans. You need to affirm them. They say that if you don't, you could cause them to want to self-harm. Right? You're actually committing violence against your child if you say, no, you're not trans, and we're not going to let you do that. You're actually going to drive them to suicide. Now, that the evidence is completely opposite. If all these children through history really did want to be trans, and classical Christian thought suppressed that in them, then we should have seen massive amounts of suicide back when there were no self-identified trans people. And we should see a lot less suicide rates amongst those who finally have the freedom and the affirmation to be what they always were supposedly were, which was trans, right? So we should have much lower suicide rates in trans people today, much higher rates in children before, but that isn't at all what's going on. Even secular scientists point this out. That is not what's happening. So people that are causing this type of a thing, we shouldn't be shamed by them. Think about what we would do. Imagine if every that a child, let me put it this way. Imagine that if a child who wore a hoodie was 19 times more likely to kill themselves than children who didn't wear hoodies. We would not be affirming wearing hoodies. Nobody would be saying, hey, if your child identifies as being someone who wears a hoodie, you need to let them wear a hoodie. We'd say, no, you know what? There's something about the hoodies that is causing massive amounts of self-harm. We certainly are not going to be affirming it, and we would probably be talking about banning hoodies for every kid, if that were the case. So here we have something that kids say they are. Supposedly they identify, they know they're trans, and we're going to affirm it even though it results, and this is just one matrix, and by every matrix they're worse off. Not religious matrix, not from a religious perspective. In every way, they're worse off. So this is the type of parenting that you're up against. You do not need to feel, as a Christian, that you're the unsophisticated one, that you're the one that doesn't know what modernity is, that you're the one that is living in the dark ages. You're the caveman dragging your child by the hair and beating them with a club. I know that's how they want to portray it. That isn't at all the case. It's the opposite. The people that are causing the most harm to children are not Christians exercising godly spanking. They are not the ones that are the problem in this world today. So, don't allow yourself to be shamed by the shameful and the shameless. Don't allow yourself to be shamed. Having said that, I think it's very important that Christians be very clear in their own minds and be very clear verbally when we talk to others that there is a lot of spanking that is abuse. It would be incorrect, inaccurate to portray Christian upbringing and spanking as never abusive. It is often abusive, and there is no biblical justification for that. That is wrong. Jesus said, "Woe unto them who offend one of these little ones." Now, that may have metaphorical implications to being like the poor, the needy, people who are marginalized. In that way, maybe that means. But if you read the context, Jesus is referring primarily to children, and Jesus was a huge defender of children, and he taught that we should not in any way scandalize, offend, abuse children. That God is the God of widows and children. And so a lot of spanking is actually abusive, and we need to be very clear about that, and we need to condemn that in our churches and in our families. For instance, rage spanking. When parents are spanking because they're angry that their favorite lamp got broken, or their favorite dishes got broken, or because it spilled something on their favorite couch, or whatever it is, their child walked in and got mud on the couch, and you're mad. You're not angry because you told the child, do not come in, and they did it anyways and rebellious. You're just mad because your couch got dirty. You're mad because your favorite thing got broken. And you take that out on them and you spank them because that made you feel better. That's abuse. That's abuse. If you're spanking because it makes you feel better, that is abuse. If you're spanking because you want to get revenge, you got revenge spanking, that's abusive. It's abusive every time, and Christians should be condemning that behavior. That is not what the Bible is talking about. Never mind the old English language of the verses I read, that you'll beat him and he won't die, and say, see there, the Bible's saying you can just beat your children. It is not using the word beat the way we use it today. That is not what he's saying. He is not saying it's impossible to abuse the child. That is not what Proverbs is saying, and it's not the lesson of the New Testament especially. Before we continue with spanking, let me just say very briefly, that is not the only way to correct a child either. You are not sinning if you decide as a parent, I'm not going to spank my children. The Bible does not command that you must spank your children. Proverbs is not the law. Proverbs is a book of wisdom, of counsel, of advice. You are not committing sin if you look at it and say, I think I'm smarter than Solomon. I think I'm smarter than all of the past prophets. I think I'm smarter, and I'm going to do it my way. That is not sin. It may not be very smart, but it's not sin. And there are many parents who raise children just fine without, hold on a second, I think it's this thing that's causing that. That raise their children just fine without spanking their children. So you can raise your children, especially if you don't have a lot of children. We'll get to that in a minute. But you can do it without spanking. So I'm not here telling you, you must spank your child. If you don't spank your child, you're not a good Christian. That is not what I'm saying. What I am saying is if the only reason you don't want to spank your child is because you think it makes you look unsophisticated, well, then you need to quit looking for the approbation of the world. These are not the people you need approbation from. These are not the people that you need to be worried about what they think. They're wrong about everything. That doesn't make us right about everything, but they're wrong about everything. We don't need to worry about what pleases them or what they think makes you a good parent. Now, if you, for other reasons, for your own reasons of conscience, of circumstance, of society where you live, for instance, if you live in Poland, spanking is going to be a very difficult thing to do without incurring a tremendous amount of problems with the government. There are situations like that. And I think Christians need to be able to pivot and be very wise. Jesus told us we need to be wise as serpents. So we need to learn, we as Christians need to be wise, we need to be sagacious, we don't need to be stupid. And so there are other ways to parent that are not spanking. But it's not because anyone is going to try to shame me. So that's what we need to do. Now, while we're talking about abuse, it's very important to point out that child abuse is real. It is real. And it is far more pervasive and far more widespread than just spanking. Spanking is not the only form of child abuse at all. Physical violence is not the only form of child abuse. For instance, if you allow, or if a person allows, if a parent allows their child to walk around miserable, sad, whiny, that's child abuse. What is the difference between a child being miserable and sad because you hit them and you abuse them physically, and then being miserable and sad because you just let them be miserable and sad and you don't put their mind in a frame of reference to say, hey, I'm happy. Look, unless your child is actually physically ill or has a physical problem, there's no reason for them not to be happy. None. They have no concerns. They're not worried about tomorrow. And I'm not talking about teenagers. I'm talking about right now little children. If you have a toddler, you have a baby that's a year old or 2 years old or 5 or even up to 9 or 10 or 11 perhaps, but you have a young child, they're not thinking about tomorrow. So the reason why they have angst isn't because they're worried about the atomic bomb. They're not worried about the economy. They're not even worried. They're not going and opening the fridge saying, that doesn't look like enough food to last the week. I might starve to death. That is not what's going on. They just don't know that they're happy. And it's your job as a parent to explain to them they are happy. And it's incredibly easy to do. Spanking is a really easy way to teach them how happy they are. With my children, when they were miserable and sad, I would tell them, oh, you think you're sad. No. You don't know what sadness is. Let me show you what real sadness is. And I'd give them a spanking. And then they'd say, you know, Dad, sweet Father, you were right. I had no idea how happy I was. I am so happy now. In fact, it worked so well, often I didn't even have to spank them. I'd say, you're sad? And they'd go, no, not at all. I'm very happy. I'm not saying that even small children don't have occasionally reasons to be sad. If their dog dies, they lose their favorite toy, they can be sad. Now, if they lose a toy, I'm going to teach them as a parent that there's an appropriate amount of sadness. You're not going to stomp your feet and lay on the ground and act like it's the end of the world. It is not that important. Now, I don't just get out the paddle and whip them the first time, but the second time, probably so. Give them a spank and say, look, that toy isn't that important. You get to have a little bit of sadness, appropriate. And this isn't about revenge on the child. You're not beating the kid because he's stupid. You're training them. You're teaching him. You're saying, look, there's an appropriate amount of sadness in life. And if you don't learn that, then you're going to fall apart with everything that happens. Everything's the end of the world. You teach your children to learn to put things in perspective. And that's why children should be happy. Children should be walking around smiling. They just should. They should just be content, happy. They have no concerns. They don't have to go to work tomorrow. They don't have to feed anyone. They don't have to pay the rent. They don't have to hardly even pick up what they make a mess on. They have zero problems. They should live like that. And you can teach them to do that. And if you have a child that's unhappy, you can teach them to be happy in like 2 days. You just give them a spanking when they're unhappy. And you say, no, I've examined your life. I've examined your circumstances, your immediate situation, and you have no reason to be unhappy. Your diaper's clean. You're well fed. You're not cold. You're not hot. There's nothing stinging you. You don't have any physical ailments. You should be a happy child. And if one spanking makes them happy, well, you just solved all their problems. And not teaching your child to be happy. Now, it doesn't have to be through a spanking. We'll get to why I think this is the best route with small children. But whichever way, when you don't teach your child how happy they are, how content they are, how good their life is, that's child abuse. Having a child who in his own mind believes he's miserable. Well, it doesn't matter how he got to that state. Whether a child is miserable because he's been physically abused, or because his parents, through neglect, have allowed him to think the same pattern of thought that an abused child thinks, that's child abuse. You should not let your child cosplay abuse. Cosplay victimhood. Because it is victimhood, even though it isn't real. Because it's real in their mind. They're living it out. That's abuse. So there's more ways of being abusive than to be actively abusive. Now, these other ways, well, they're more acceptable in society. Allowing children to be miserable is a very acceptable child abuse in our society today. I think parents who do that should be treated just like parents who physically abuse their children. I think they should be treated with the same view, with the same disdain, with the same proactive intervention from government, even if necessary. It's not right. There is no reason for all these children, 8 to 12-year-olds, suicide rates increasing by 8% a year every year for the last 22 years, or the last 18 years. This is just wrong. And who are we going to blame? The 8-year-old or the parent who is allowing their children, and I'm not saying that all of them are this case. I know that everybody's different, and there are children out there that have serious psychological problems and they need professional help. I get that. Most of them are not that way. They just need parents who realize that there's more than just the active abuse. There's also the inactive abuse. There's the abuse of doing nothing. Let me give you an example of this. You could look at like when the pandemic started, the supposed pandemic started. Everyone says, we need to shut everything down because people will die. So we're going to do something to prevent deaths, and that's great. There's times when that has to happen. That's fine. The problem is that by shutting everything down, also killed people. And we knew that. Economists had already predicted how many people would die, and they get it right by an extremely small margin of error. They already know because they've run the tests in other instances. They know exactly how many will die through not doing anything. What does that mean? Well, if you shut everything down, you don't get cancer screenings. You don't get mammograms. You don't get preventive health care. And so things that would be caught and solved and save your life drag out 2 or 3 years, and when you finally do find out that you have prostate cancer or breast cancer or some other thing like that, it's too late and you're going to die. Not because anyone did anything, but because they didn't do anything. And this is what parents are doing today, many parents. They're not doing anything wrong, they're not doing everything wrong. They're not doing. So you can't just say, this is the problem with modern views of parenting. It's doing less, doing nothing. Don't spank, don't correct, don't. And so they withdraw, they just let their children live in existential angst, like if they're, some 40-year-old poet, when they're an 8-year-old kid who just should be playing in the dirt, having fun. And there's no reason that child can't do that, except that parents are allowing, through inactivity, through inaction, allowing that, and that is abuse. So there are many other forms of abuse. One of the most common things that are said about spanking, like I said at the beginning, is that spanking is hitting. You hit your child. Spanking is not hitting. Just like jail is not kidnapping. Self-defense is not violence. War is not murder. Amputation is not a knife attack. When a doctor amputates a leg, he didn't commit a knife attack. Right? Setting a bone, if someone has a broken bone and you set it, that's not assault. If you do reconstructive rhinoplasty, right, that's not breaking somebody's nose, even though you break their nose to do it. Right? There's a difference. You say, well, spanking is hitting. You're hitting. No, you're not. Spanking is not hitting. It's not hitting. So we need to be clear on that. If it is, then we need to go, if spanking is hitting, and we're going to put parents in jail for spanking, then we need to go put every doctor in jail for being Jack the Ripper. Every surgeon should be in jail because they attack their patients with a knife. Every policeman should be in jail. Everybody who does anything like that should be in jail because they're just doing the same thing the criminals are doing. And that is a view, right? That's the argument against the death penalty. Death penalty's wrong because you're killing people. No, it's not. Just like jail isn't wrong. Look, again, I want you to just think. I know it's hard because we face up against modern society that is telling us all of this stuff and making us feel terrible and making us feel unsophisticated and stupid and horrible and abusive and you're hitting. And it makes us feel that way and we buy into it and we think, yeah, it is, because there's so much pressure to think that way. But all you have to do is look behind the curtain. It's like the Wizard of Oz. Pull back the curtain and look what's behind there. They say, you know, that's abusive. Spanking is hitting, it's abusive. Give them a timeout. How is that not violence? It's like thinking, well, caning is, there's countries that practice caning, like Thailand. So if you get caught, like very famously, that young man got caught, I think it was Thailand or Singapore, but he got caught graffitiing, right? Tagging. Well, in that country, when they catch you doing that, they cane you. They take you out in the public square, they take a cane, and they give you lashes. They spank you. It's a little more than spanking. It's more than spanking, but it's spanking, basically. It's what the Bible had in mind when Proverbs says that the rod is for the fool's back. That's what he is. It's caning. You cane them. You say, that's horrible. Oh, they're so backwards. They're so third world. Look at those cavemen beating people, hitting people. We're better. We lock them up. People that think that have never been to prison. Prison is horrible. Horrible. If I could choose between a caning and prison, I'll take the caning. Parents think that they are being more sophisticated because they're not spanking, they're putting their kids in a timeout. The only reason a timeout works with the ones it works is because it creates violence in their mind. It creates pain. It's not physical pain induced by your hand, but it is pain. Telling a child who wants to get up and run and play and jump and be active that he needs to sit still for 20 minutes hurts. It hurts in their brain. It hurts in their inner self. It is painful. It's why it works. And if a child likes doing it, it has no help. Like telling me when I was a kid, you have to sit in your room and read books. Okay. I was so naughty. Poor me. That would not have been punishment at all. Right? That's not punishment. It would have been my pleasure to do that. The only way any type of punishment works is it creates a state of pain. Whether it be physical or psychological, you have to create a state of pain. That's how we learn. Where did I put it? I have a quote for you on this. It says, this is from the Complete Neurological Care Organization or Institute, and they say the primary biological purpose of pain is protective. Pain is protective. It encourages behaviors that prevent further bodily harm, and it promotes healing. That's what pain does. This is not from a Christian organization, and they're certainly not advocating for spanking. I want to be very clear. They're not talking about spanking. They're just talking about pain in general. What is pain? Why does pain exist? Pain is important. It is a protective measure that God has designed in the way, well, all animals, but humans also interact with the world. And what does pain do? It does two things. One is it promotes healing. Pain promotes healing. And two, it teaches you not to do the same stupid thing again. It teaches you to avoid damaging yourself. People who have illnesses like the biblical form of leprosy, what happens in leprosy isn't that leprosy actually eats away your extremities. What they found out. Doctors did research. We thought, well, these diseases, what they do is they like eat away your ears and your nose and stuff. And they find out, no, that's actually not what happens. It kills the nerve endings. And so if you live in a very poor place like India or somewhere like that, where it's terrible sanitation, or at least it was at one time, well, then it's the rats that come at night and chew away your extremities, and you just don't know they're doing it because you can't feel them. So that was one way. And then, of course, you're burning yourself. You're getting your fingers caught in things because you don't feel it until it's too late, and they're getting crushed, and that's how you're losing your extremities. It's from not feeling pain. Pain is extremely important. Your life would be terrible if you didn't experience pain. That's what pain does. Pain is a way in which we learn. And so, the only way we can really have to teach anyone anything is by somehow applying pain. It can be physical pain, it can be psychological pain, but it has to be something uncomfortable for us to learn. That is how we learn, it is how we heal, it's how we protect ourselves, through pain. So what's the difference between spanking and hitting? It's the same difference between war and murder. It's the same difference between surgery and a knife attack. Intent and purpose. The reason why a doctor is not a serial stabber, even though he has actually cut open more people than any serial killer, is intent and purpose. He has an intention to do good and a purpose to make you better. And we allow him to take a knife and cut us wide open. The reason why spanking is not hitting is because parents who spank biblically, now I'm dividing that from abuse, but parents who spank biblically do it with the intention to help the child, not themselves. That's why I said at the beginning, if you're doing it to make yourself feel better, then you're abusive. And that isn't spanking, that's beating. That's abuse. But if you're doing it not for your sake, but for their sake, and for a clear, defined purpose in your mind, to help that child reach the maximum potential that God has designed in them, that is not abuse. That is another form of correction. And it is no less legitimate than timeouts. And it is no more abusive than the psychological pain of ostracism, which is what a timeout is. You're saying, you know what? You cannot be part of society. You're outcast. Go over there by yourself. You don't get to be with everyone else. We don't like you no more. Go sit over there. Go away. If you don't think that causes psychological pain, if you don't think that is as painful or more than a spanking, then why is it that children will do far more to avoid that pain than the pain of a spanking, than physical pain? They will put themselves through physical pain to avoid that pain. I'm not against timeouts. I'm not against sitting someone in a corner. I think parents need to be incredibly creative. We need to outsmart our children. You must outsmart your children. I'm just saying, do not think that somehow spanking is this horrible, horrible infliction of pain and that time out is this sophisticated. Just go to a prison and see what the end result of that line of correction results in. It's terrible. It's horrible. It's inhumane, the things that happen to people in prisons. Terrible. So they are not, the world is not morally superior just because they're not using corporal punishment, because they're not quote unquote spanking, so they're morally superior and you feel inferior and you feel bad and you're like, oh no. You should not feel that way at all. At all. They're wrong and Proverbs is still right. And you know this, there is no society and there is no family and there is no person, maybe a few exceptions, but generally speaking, there's nobody and nothing that doesn't practice corporal punishment. Even societies that supposedly don't have the death penalty, of course they have the death penalty. Every single society in existence has the death penalty. They just don't do it in the courts. They don't do it with due deliberation and due process. How do they do it? Let's say you're going to go out and kill somebody. If you kill somebody and you go to court for it in England, you cannot get the death penalty. That's true. But their policemen can put you to death if they catch you in the act. And if you say, I'm going to kill that person, and they say, no, you can't do that, and you say, no, I'm going to do that, they will come to the point that they will kill you rather than let you kill that person. Well, that's just the death penalty applied in other means. We all have it. Every society has it. They want to pretend that they don't because they don't do it in the courts, but they do it in the streets. So every society has these. Corporal punishment cannot go away because at some point it has to end there. It's like, I know a lot of people kind of would balk at what at this point I would often make, but the penalty for every crime is the death penalty, ultimately. Not stopping at a stop sign. What is the ultimate penalty for that? It's the death penalty. How is that? You don't stop at a stop sign, the policeman gives you a ticket. You don't pay your ticket, or they're going to give out a warrant. They're going to come serve the warrant. You say, no, I'm not doing it. I don't agree to that. I don't accept that, and I will not be served a warrant. Well, then they're going to bring a SWAT team. And if you resist that, how does this end? It always ends in death. If you take it all the way to its logical end, every crime ends in death. The death penalty is in every society, and it's for every crime. You can avoid it by complying early, but it is the ultimate end. I just want to try to put in context and in perspective that Christians should not walk around feeling that somehow we miss the train of modernity and we're stuck back in the dark ages. We're not. Spanking is not some ancient, horrible practice. It is a very useful tool for parenting. Why is it useful? What are the positives? Let me give you a few. One is it brings immediate resolution to the problem. This is why I think spanking is a very important tool, and I think most parents, especially where society doesn't make it impossible to do it, I do think there's places probably like Poland where I would not encourage parents to spank just because, I don't know, I'm not there, but I could see in places like that where it just would not be worthwhile. You have to weigh all the externalities involved in something, and it might not be worthwhile. But in Texas, where basically the law says spanking is not abuse and it is permitted still today in Texas, let's just talk about ourselves. And I'm not judging anyone outside of Texas for how they raise their children. But here in Texas, it brings immediate resolution, a very quick adjustment of attitude. Why is this important? Well, if you're a mother of 3, or a working mother, or a working father, you don't have hours and hours to bring resolution to your child's problems. Now, there are parents who say, look, what you need to do is you just need to talk and reason and communicate. Communicate with the child. Just communicate and slowly pressure them to do what's right. I'm not mocking that. And I think a lot of people, a lot of fundamentalists will substitute communication for spanking or spanking for communication. They'll not communicate at all, and that's a huge mistake. So I'm not mocking communication, but if you have 3 children, you don't have time to spend a half a day on one child on one problem. You got to solve issues and move on. It's why Irma Bombeck, I think she's the one that said that parents with only one child aren't real parents. They don't know what it is to really parent, right? When you have one child, you know who did it every time. It's like you don't get to be Solomon, judging between the two sides. You don't get to have that superpower. So, yeah, when you have one child, you have a lot more time. If you're not a working mother, you have a lot more time. If you're a dad who has a 9-to-5 job or a job that doesn't require any overtime and you're home a lot, then you have more time to pursue other avenues of correction. But when you have a bunch of kids or you have a job or you have a lot going on, you need to solve a problem and you need to solve it now, not in an hour from now. Spanking does that. Spanking well done solves the problem immediately. Almost all of them. There's exceptions, but almost all of them solves it immediately. And it solves it for you and it solves it for the child. Again, I always chose the spanking because I was always given, not always, many times as a child, I was given a choice. Do you want a spanking or do you want to be grounded for a week? Oh, I'll take the spanking. I got things to do. I got places to be. I don't have time for that. Just give me the spanking. Let's get it over with. I'd always choose that. And so it solves it. It's an immediate resolution, not just for the parent and for their time, which is valuable. It's also an immediate resolution for the children. Also, like I said earlier, it speaks our natural body language. Spanking speaks the natural body language of pain. Physical pain is the way we first learn. It's why spanking is far more effective on little children than it is later in life. If you're waiting till your children are 4, 5, 6 years old to spank them, you're probably waiting way too long. And that's the time you ought to be weaning them off of spanking, not into it. You shouldn't be getting into spanking at 7, 8, 9, 10. That's not the time. I'm not saying you can never spank a child. The Bible has you spanking children up until they're like 30. And some 30-year-olds in our society could use a good whipping. They could use a good spanking. It would solve a tremendous amount of stupidity in the world if we just gave some people some spankings. Believe me, there's some times I've been wanting to do that at work. Just give some spankings. I'm sure my wife wishes she could give a good caning every now and then too. It's like the Bible says, it drives foolishness out of the heart. It drives it far from them. It's very good. It's our natural body language. It's how did you learn not to touch sharp objects or hot objects? By doing it. You touch it, it burns, and you're more careful next time. It's how you learn not to just gulp down hot milk. Because you burn your mouth once, and then you're going to be real careful every time you go to sip a glass. You're going to be very cautious. It imprints on your mind immediately. Spanking does that at a very early age. Very early age, spanking works that way. The people that do research in pain have found that we have specialized super fast. That's their term, right? That's their technical term. Super fast neurons with special myelin sheathing, special insulation on those pathways to get pain to the brain. That is the fastest signal that reaches the brain, is pain. And for a long time we didn't know why. Because your body actually transmits signals slowly, relatively slowly. But pain is almost immediate. It happens and you feel it almost instantaneously. Because God designed your body with super fast conductions. The download rate and the upload rate of your pain network is extraordinarily fast, right? Put it into internet terms. Your baud rate, if you were in my time in the internet, your baud rate is very fast, super fast. And so when you as a parent are spanking, you are taking advantage of those super fast pathways. And you're taking advantage of that entire design, that system that God has designed into you and into your children The way they were meant to be. They were designed to learn through pain at a certain age and learn to not do the things that cause that pain. And that's what spanking does. It associates behavior with pain. And for little children especially, that is extremely powerful. Much more powerful than trying to reason with them 30 minutes later. Because for a child, 30 minutes is a lifetime. Just like you're real bad at connecting the dots, that the decision you made 10 years ago is the reason why you're in the situation you're in right now, and you don't connect those dots real well, I don't connect those dots real well. They don't connect a conversation 30 minutes from now with something they did right now. But they connect a spanking that happens almost immediately after misbehaving with that behavior, and they say, that behavior hurts. I'm going to avoid that behavior. That attitude, that's painful. I'm going to avoid that attitude. And it works very, very well. It's your natural body language. And third thing is it reduces stress and exhaustion in both the parent and the child. Parents that are all stressed out all the time, oh, so stressed out, I don't think I could handle another child. They just need to spank their child more. For by and large, that's the issue. They're just not spanking enough. They're exhausted because they're allowing themselves. They're abusing themselves and they're abusing their child. Parents and children should enjoy each other. Kids are fantastic. They're the best thing in life. The best thing in life. There's nothing better. Anyone who thinks they're not going to have kids because... Look, I know some people can have kids, and I weep with them. And this is in no way meant for that category. But parents who say, we don't want kids because we want to enjoy life. We don't want kids because we want to have stuff. We want to be, dinks. Dual income, no kids. Have money to go places. What a waste. All of that, trips, vacations, possessions, none of it means anything. Children are the only thing in life that are truly valuable. They really are. And that isn't just from a biblical perspective. Even though that is the biblical perspective, it's not just that. Even a total atheistic evolutionary scientist will tell you that it is the only thing in life is reproduction. Now, they're looking at it from a very different perspective, and they're not looking at it from a point of view of satisfaction or of spiritual growth or anything like that, but they will tell you there is nothing else in all of nature that matters ultimately than reproduction. And that's the Bible's view also, for much deeper reasons than the evolutionary biologists. Much deeper reasons. Children are everything. They're everything. But if you're all stressed out the entire time they're toddlers, that's the best age. When kids get to be like 13 and they start thinking they have their own brain, that's when it's terrible. They think they can think for themselves. They can't, which is why they still like, hey, I don't need you, Dad, but can you give me $20? Because they can't even, they don't even have a job. But they think they're the smartest thing that ever walked the earth. That's when they're like, oh, not nearly as much fun. When they're like 2 to 9, oh, that's fantastic. Love that time. Love that time. And to not enjoy that, to miss out on that. Look, spanking is not going to solve all of your kids' problems for their whole life. When they're teenagers, you're going to have to delve deep into an arsenal of creativity to handle that. You can't just say, I'm going to spank them till they're 20. Till they move out, I'm going to beat them. That doesn't work. Spanking stops working mostly once they get up into pre-adolescence. It really doesn't work very well, but it works super well when they're very small. And just a little bit of that medicine solves most problems, and you just learn, and then you just can enjoy your children. They enjoy their parents. I know you might think, well, if you spank their kid, they're going to hate me. Then you're not spanking them hard enough. If your children hate you after you spanked them, it's because you didn't spank them hard enough. Now, I'm not saying that you should spank them as hard as you possibly can. You spank them hard enough that they love you. And with my children, I always made them after I gave them a spanking, then they had to give me a hug and say, "I love you, sweet daddy." That was worse than the spanking. Ask them. They're like, "Just give me another spanking. Don't make me say that." But they had to say, "I love you, sweet daddy. I love you too." And then we could enjoy each other. All right, reduces stress. Okay. Let me give you a few practical pointers that I've learned. I'm sure there's a lot more, and there's ones I don't know that I should have known. Believe me, I know more about it now than I did when I was doing it, which is terrible, right? But these are things that I learned, and maybe you can take these and apply them. So how should you spank so that it's done biblically and is done profitably and productively? Because that's what we're looking for. This isn't about just like revenge. This is about helping the child. How do you maximize the help to the child spanking? How should you do it? One, you should do it as early as possible. As early as possible. Now, I'm not saying that, the kid's 3 days old, spank them. You need to wait at least a week. No, I'm joking. There is a point where a child can understand pain, and it's very young. Very young. There's a time when the child has learned. See, when children first born, they're hungry, they cry. They're sleepy, they cry. That's their language. They can't speak. Crying is their language. That's fine. Now, I understand my wife is sitting here thinking you're a hypocrite, because I didn't understand that when my children, especially with my oldest, right at the beginning, I didn't know these things. But it's true. Children can't say, "Hey, I'm hungry," so they cry. We have to understand that's their language. But children are super smart. Super smart. They really are. They're incredibly smart. And they learn like any con man. They learn almost immediately that they can get what they want also. Not just what they need by crying, but they can get anything they want. They want mommy to pick them up all the time. And they can get it. All they got to do is cry. And they'll get what they want. And they learn that real fast. And you need to disabuse them of that real fast. Real fast. So that crying is language used correctly and appropriately. And you can do that pretty young. Now, I don't know what age would be best. I think every parent has to kind of gauge that. But as soon as you can tell your child is lying to you, they're not crying because they're hungry. They're not crying because they're dirty. They're not crying because they're hurting. They're crying because they just want their way. Now, there's nothing wrong with a child crying because he wants attention. We all want attention. We all want to be held. We all want to be loved. And we have ways of asking for that. They have a way. That's crying. That's fine. But when they're just crying because they're not getting what they want, and they've realized they're the king of the house, and they're not being treated in the kingly fashion that they expect, now they're lying to you. Now you spank them. Now they're old enough to learn. And you give them a good little spank, and you tell them, "No, you don't get to lie. I respond to your crying, but not to your lying." So as early as possible. And you as a parent need to try to figure out what that actually means, but as early as possible. Don't wait late. If you're waiting till your children are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and then I'm going to spank them, don't bother. Don't bother. Use other means. Don't ever spank them. You're just wasting your time now. That won't work. You need to do it as early as possible. You need to do it, too, as quickly as possible. Spanking should not be torture. Tonight, I'm going to give you a spanking so they can just stew in it and torment themselves on it. Don't do that. You should do it as quickly as possible. Now, again, I wasn't a great example of this. To me, that meant on the spot. Like, it didn't matter where we were and who we were with. I just pick them up and whip them right there. I didn't even leave the room. That's not the best way. That's not the best way. But you also shouldn't say, "Tonight when we get home, figure something out." Spanking should be done quickly. Why? The main reason is because children are bad at making the connection. You're trying to make a connection in their brain between that behavior or that attitude or that action and pain. And you need that connection to be as tight as possible, which means that pain has to come as quickly as you can make it come. So as quickly as possible. It should be as clearly as possible. Your child should not legitimately not understand why they're being spanked. They should know why. They should know before they even did it what it was going to happen. This is not something my parents approve of. And if I do this, it's going to hurt. And so if your child doesn't have that awareness, doesn't know, you have not explained things to them, or you've made too many rules that they can't keep track of. You need to have few rules. They need to be the important things. Things that they can manage in their brain, that they can keep memory of, they can remember, and they can know. And when you say, so when you're going to do it, you say, do you understand why you're getting a spanking? Do you understand what you did? Do you understand what's happening? Well, you told me not to come in with mud all over my shoes, and I did it. That's right. I told you not to do that, and you did it. You chose to do that. Bend over. Spank, spank, spank. That's what it feels like. Don't do it no more. Do you understand what's going on? Do you understand why you got a spanking? Yes. Don't come in with mud on my shoes. That's right. So when you come in, what are you going to do? I'm going to take off my shoes. That's right. Very good. Now give me a hug and say, I love you, sweet daddy. So it should be as clear as possible. Fourth thing, it should be as unthreatening as possible. This isn't about it being imposing and threatening and the child. Ah. This should be loving, not a matter of I'm bigger than you and that means I can do whatever I want and you can't do anything about it. That's not what spanking should ever be. So this should be very unthreatening. Should get down on their level, not stand over top and cower them into the ground. And I realize everyone that knows me is just thinking, you are just this massive hypocrite. Where were you when I was growing up? That's what my kids are thinking right now. Don't do what I did. Don't do what I did. Do what I'm telling you now. This is what I've learned after having three kids, and watching a lot of other people with their kids. So you don't want to use it. Spanking is not a threat. You should never say, if you do that, that's threatening. If you do that, you're going to get a spanking. Don't do it. I'm warning you. You're going to get it. No, spanking should never be a threat. It should be a reality. You set the rules. Do not do this. If you do this, I'm going to have to correct you. I'm going to have to deal with it. Don't do that. If they do it, you give them a spanking. If you're not going to give them a spanking, don't threaten you might. You should never say you're going to do it unless you're going to do it. Ever. You should never say, I'm going to give you a spanking, and then say, I didn't do it. You either do it or don't do it. If you're going to do it, you have to do it. So if I told my kids, you're going to get a spanking, 100% of the time they got it. 100%. That was one thing I was really good at. Very consistent. But it's very important. Otherwise, kids do the math. And they will actually take 9 spankings if they can get away with 1. So if you're not going to do it every time, you're better off not doing it at all. At all. It has to be 100%. 100%. All right. You want to do it, fifth thing, as carefully as possible. As carefully as possible. Spanking should not be ever out of control. This isn't about coming in with a belt, just wailing away whatever lands, whack, hitting everywhere. That is not spanking. That is abuse. That is abuse. Spanking should be controlled. It should be calm. Bend over. I taught my kids, they're going to bend over, they're going to take a spanking. I'm not going to hold them down and hold down their legs and they're flailing around and I'm beating around and hitting their hands. No. My rule was this. You bend over and I spank you. If you move around, then we start over. So I'm going to give you 3 spanks. If you move around and roll around and put your hands back, I stop and we start over. 3 spanks. Until you take your 3 spanks like you're supposed to. And it doesn't take long. Pain teaches. Pretty soon they realize, I'd rather get 3 than 30. So I'm just going to bend over and take 3 spanks. So it needs to be as carefully as possible. You need to use an implement that you can control. I don't personally think a belt is a great thing to spank with because it's too uncontrollable. I think a rod or a paddle or a wooden spoon or something of that nature is much more controllable, and it needs to be something you can control and you can apply the pain exactly where it needs to be applied and nowhere else. It ought to be done, and this is something I wish I would have understood better. I feel real bad about this, but you can do better. It needs to be done as privately as possible. Now, it's not always possible, but spanking your kid in public is about you, not them. It's about you saying, I don't allow that, and my child misbehaved, but that's not my fault, that's his fault. You bear the shame in public. Your child misbehaves and it makes you feel bad, that's your shame. You don't need to shame your child in public. Now, there are times when it's somewhat unavoidable, and there's a difference between being amongst close family members or close friends and being, for instance, in church. I don't think you should spank your child in church practically ever. If your child doesn't know how to behave in church, you don't need to take them to the nursery and spank them. You need to teach them how to behave at home. And you can do that. Like we taught in the training class, you can train your child how to behave in public so when you're in public, they behave. You don't need to spank them in a restaurant. You need to teach your children how to behave in a restaurant. All right, as privately as possible. It's not intended. Spanking is not about embarrassing and humiliating your child. Seventh thing, we got two more. Seventh thing, it needs to be as painlessly, I know this is paradoxical, but it needs to be as painlessly as possible. We're not trying to inflict maximum pain. We're not trying to damage anybody. Spanking that is just as hard as you can hit is not spanking, it's abuse. Spanking needs to be as painlessly, it has to be enough pain that it hurts and they cry, basically. If you don't spank them hard enough, they get angry. You take and give them the little tap on the hand, that just makes people mad. Try it. Next time we're together and you do something I don't like, I'm going to thump you on the nose. Now, do you think that's going to make you repentant or angry? It's going to make you angry. A spanking has to hurt enough that they get over the anger and they feel remorse. That's what spanking accomplishes if it's done right. Spanking too hard goes the other way. So it's a very fine line. You got to know it. You got to be able to distinguish that. Spanking shouldn't leave bruises. It should sting. It shouldn't bruise. For small children, I found that it's best to give them a spank on the bare thigh or the bare buttock. Something very light that just stings. And just enough. You know the difference between your child when they're yelling out of anger and when they're crying out of pain. You need the pain cry, not the anger cry. And that's how you need to spank. The little thump on the diaper and then, that is not spanking. That's just provoking. Don't provoke. Last thing, we'll end with this. It needs to be as conclusively as possible. As conclusively as possible. There's no good way to say this where it was parallel with all the other points, so I'll just explain what I mean by that. Spanking needs to be the end of the matter. That's the end of it. Child misbehaved. He did something, broke something, because you told him not, hey, do not throw the ball in the house. Throws the ball in the house. Break something that's very important to you. You should not spank them because it's broken. It's because they disobeyed. If they hadn't broken it, would they have gotten a spanking? Most parents is no. That's wrong. You don't wait till something bad happens that affects you personally to say, now I'm going to give you a spanking because I told you not to throw the ball, you did it all day, and now you broke something, and now you're getting a spanking. If you say, do not do that, and they do it, and nothing bad happens from it, they should get a spanking because it's about the disobedience and the rebellion, not how it affected you. Okay, but they did it. Now you spank them. You've disobeyed. Now I'm giving you a spanking, and that's it. Everything's good. You've been restored. I'm not going to bring it up a month later or a week later. Remember when you did that and you went and I told you? It's it. It's over. It's done. Spanking, when done right, is redemptive. Children feel they've paid their debt. Now, I'm not saying that every time the child does wrong, give them a spanking so they can feel good about themselves. But that is a positive side effect of spanking. It feels like your debt has been paid. And you're okay. And everyone's okay. We can be atoned. Right? This is the biblical language. We can be at one again. We can be reconciled. I did wrong. You corrected it. I paid a payment for that. And now the debt is cleared. And our relationship is restored back to its rightful place. That's how correction works when it's done right. So your children should feel pain. They should feel remorse. And then they should feel restitution, reconciliation. In all correction, not just spanking, all forms of correction need to search or need to try to accomplish that. And so, you should never bring it up again. Shouldn't bring up all the past and be mad again about it. You need to let it go. It should be a complete washing of the issue. All right? Okay, so that's my teaching on spanking. I'm sure there's a lot more because I wasn't great at raising children. I made a lot of mistakes. I've tried to find some of them, and that's where a lot of this comes from. I'm sure that as you raise yours, you'll find things you think, man, I wish he would have said this, or I'm sure he messed up there. You're absolutely right, and I hope you do better than I did.